All right. Shall we do this thing?
Let's do it.
I am Wistric, and this is...
And I'm Bruce.
And this is episode 4 of Fighting the World. This is about training. But first...
So I asked Wistric if we could do this tonight just because I know that a lot of people are feeling losses from 2020, including kingdoms I've lived in previously, specifically the East and the Mid. And I just wanted to take 10 seconds to have a moment of silence for those we've lost this year. I know and I realize that this is something a little bit deadening, especially for the chaos strain that is this, but these people were intrinsic to our Penzic experiences, our SCA experiences in general. So I just wanted to take 10 seconds to remember them, starting now. And I hope that everyone can use that brief moment of silence for whatever grieving or processing they need to do. Now, back to the chaos strain that is fighting the world with Wistric, who was going to do our intro this evening.
Practice. We know how to train for one-on-one. We have all of our drills and everything. But how do you actually train a unit, be it your local unit, the 3 people who show up to your practice, be it your region, barony, 10 people, 15 people? How do you train a kingdom? How do you train a kingdom from the ground up? How do you get an army of any size ready to win battles? And to help us out with that tonight, we have...
All right, well, we're gonna let the panelists introduce themselves because I am terrible at taking written names and trying to pronounce them. And they probably know a bit more about themselves than I do. So we're gonna start actually with Gawin from Calontir. Gawin, will you please just quickly introduce yourself, where you're from, and why you're here?
All right, so my name is Gawin, as you just heard. I'm a member of the Order of Defense in Calontir. I mundanely live in Kansas City these days, but I got started in the SCA at Wistric's practice, so I assume he's got me here to say the same things as he will to a lot of extent, but hopefully some of the experience building Calontir's army will be what we talk about too.
All right, next up, we're gonna take the introduction from Mateo.
I'm Master Mateo of Montero de Madrid. I currently live in Ansteorra. I've been doing a lot of melee for a very long time, so I helped build Mid-Realm, North Shield, and sort of rebuild Ansteorra's army. I've been general in North Shield and Ansteorra, and a line commander in like 3 different kingdoms and several different wars. So that's me. I'm one of the founding members of the Cameron's Hellhounds as well. So.
Excellent. And next up is Natalya.
I'm Natalya of Ansteorra. I currently reside in Atlantia by way of most recently Meridies, and before that North Shield as well. Been doing melee for quite some time now, and kind of helped build Meridies' army some years ago, and started up the melee manual for Meridies as there was some interest. So been doing it for some time. I was general at Gulf Wars before, and starting out war practices here.
All right, and that's awesome. Excellent. Sorry, did I cut you off?
Nope.
All right. All right. And then last but not least is Jervel.
I'm Maestra Jervel from the Outlands, Denver specifically. I've been playing SCA since about 2000. Part of the Blue Company melee manual, helped write that. Apparently I'm the person in the Outlands to talk to about melee. So.
Hey, blame Asian. He totally like threw you under this bus.
Ah, okay, I'll do that.
All right, and I know that Wistric had a super handy dandy icebreaker for y'all.
So we have people from, I think, 8 different kingdoms or something like that. Let's see, Gawin, you've been Atlantia, you are Calontir. Mateo, you've been Mid North Shield, you're in Ansteorra. Natalya, you've been North Shield, Meridies, and you're in Atlantia, and Jervel, you've been in Outlands, and anything before that? Or
Just Outlands.
you're
I
our
travel
purist-
everywhere.
You
but-
are our purist, and you've traveled everywhere. So, what's melee like culture? What is melee culture like in the kingdom you're in now? And how
Oh.
does it compare to other places?
An icebreaker, eh?
This is the easy one.
This is the easy question. Let's actually start with Jervel, since she's kind of our purist. What is the melee culture like in the Outlands? I know here in the mid, we are a war kingdom, and I can't even begin to explain the Outlands here. So you first.
Well, the Outlands is kind of like almost an army of heroes. We like the very individualistic aspect of melee and bringing those individual tactics to work together as small units in particular. We don't have the numbers to bring, 100 on 100 to things, so we focus on 10, 15 man teams, skirmishes, love to flank. So, cause chaos.
That actually kind of sounds familiar. Let's hear actually from Mateo next on the icebreaker.
Ansteorra's melee culture has changed over the years, mostly in part due to just the fact that we can't just field like several hundred fighters at Gulf War anymore. Just don't have that many fighters. So it's changed a little bit. And so we've shifted from a sort of like a heavy cavalry and big block of infantry idea to a similar, a more agile and more aggressive posture over the last few years. So that's about where it's at right now. It's growing and developing. So.
It sounds really fun. Let's jump over to Natalya for her perspective.
Since I've only been in Atlantia for 2 years now, it's a little hard. I can't say anything about what it used to be, but what I definitely see now is it's a group of very skilled individuals who all love to fight on the field and who all want to kick butt, take some names. But it is a fairly skilled group of individuals.
Yeah, that sounds like Atlantia. They're scary. And now for our most peculiar case, Gavin.
Well, I guess peculiar would be because everything that is not specifically our war prep is cut and thrust. So we were a big driving factor in cut and thrust melee becoming officially okay in the latest rules. But Jervel said an army of heroes, and we've been trying to build a culture that's very much Calontir, and one of our biggest defining factors as a kingdom is no heroes. So it's a very different approach.
It's interesting hearing that, because with how, and we're going to hopefully touch on that a little bit later, but with how the Calontir steel and rapier program grew, like you've had that opportunity to try to train that into your culture, which is really cool. So that was our icebreaker. And now we're going to jump into the big questions, which I fed to you a little bit earlier this week and asked you not to prepare too much. But I think our first question is going to be, what do we've heard about the culture of your kingdoms, but what do you specifically focus on training in a small group or a local practice? For example, if you were training a melee unit, what does that typical practice look like? Does anyone want to go first, or do you want me to just divvy it up again?
I can go first. We like to mix our melee practices as a alternating between trying to teach some core concept and then doing a more learning oriented melee around testing out that concept, where we have a very almost staged melee where one side's designed to win or lose to reinforce that concept we just tried to teach. We start with the pair, training how to defend for each other, how to work with each other, how to parry for each other. General base parries to do on one-on-one will quite often go right into the person who's standing next to you on a line, and how to adapt those for a line. And then from the pair, we grow into the trio. And then after that, it's sets of trios all working together to accomplish some goal.
How big would you say that your typical practice looks like? How big would you say? Sorry.
Sure. In Kerta, we'd be lucky to get 30 people out of practice.
Okay.
So on a melee, no, not everyone likes melee, so we would get 10 on 10.
All right. So that's a pretty decent sized practice. I know here in the mid, because we're a bunch of smaller regions. Let's jump over to Natalya. Natalya, what would you focus on with a small group or a local practice, and what does that look like?
It's a complicated answer. So I can speak mostly in part from my experience with Meridies, where when I started there, I'm just going to say some years ago now, in general, rapier was much smaller there, and melee was unfortunately mostly unheard of. There were only a few people that went to the wars, and melee didn't really super exist beyond 5-on-5. And what I learned there was it depends on the skill of the people that we have. And to begin with, small group or large group, I found the biggest thing is to get on the same set of terms, which we normally go through. We go through the rules. And then after that, we fight melee, and we would do it regardless of which practice, usually at the end. And we're trying to do the same thing here now in Atlantia, where after everyone in the group is acquainted with the same terms, just so we're on the same understanding. At the end of every practice, we try to do a couple round of melees just to get people more into it, especially if there's a lot of people who haven't done it before. And one of the fun things we do, we always end with a game. I'm sure Wistric is familiar with the game we played a couple of times with him there as We Win. And the idea is that you're all individuals. You fight someone, whoever wins, the loser becomes on your team. And you start to fight in groups, and it's a constantly moving group until everyone's on one side. And really it's to build field awareness and kind of the chaos of melee. So that's really where we start, and that's where we're actually starting with Alania's group too, to kind of get people to learn to work together and to be more aware rather than to have a goal for that individual. But that definitely is different if we're working with a group of people who are more skilled in rapier, or also who are more experienced in melee.
Okay. Yeah, that game sounds like a lot of fun. I can't wait till we can get together so we can do it again. Let's jump over to Gavin. What does a typical melee practice, like a small group or local practice, look like in Calontir?
Well, so Calontir, because we were doing the experiment, hasn't generally been able to have melee at local practices. And also our numbers are pretty low. So I tend to like 2v1, 3v1 type drills. Or actually I think something fairly similar to what Natalya just described are scenarios and games that are really about building endurance and fighters getting used to just being in melees and then changing the scenario and the situation fairly rapidly. So things, I think the mid-realm calls it Fox and Hounds or something like that. But where you have, a pair of fighters fighting one person, and then you add people over time, or you rotate through who the teammates are, sort of games.
Yeah, we really like that one here. I think we have at least 10 variations on it.
Fox and Hounds is awesome.
All right, let's jump over.
Okay, but what is it?
Wait, what is it?
What is it?
What is Foxes and Hounds?
Like the way that I know it, if you guys don't mind me stepping in, is if you have like 3 fighters, you can do it with more than this if you want. But there's one person fighting usually 2 other people. The 2 people are the fox, or the 2 people are the hounds. The one person is the fox. You fight. If the fox dies to the 2 people, then the hounds have to fight over the fox. And so basically the last person standing then switches out and becomes the fox. And so and so you have 2-on-1s, and people learn how to work together and also how to fight against larger odds.
So
that's what I remember.
Our classic variation that we tend to do at our war practices here in the mid-realm is very similar to what Mateo laid out, but instead of if just the fox dies, then they rotate. It's whoever killed the fox becomes the
right. That's
fox.
what I mean. Sorry. The last, that person overgives them. Oh, that's interesting, because then that does a little bit different, because for me, it's the last person standing, right? So yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
So that's actually how it works, is whoever killed the fox becomes the new fox, and the hound needs to know enough to back up so that the fox
And
doesn't kill them before the
re-engage.
new
Mhm.
hound comes in. We also have added variations to the rules where if the old hound doesn't call for reinforcement, no one's allowed to show up to help. We've done some kind of rude things like that to make sure that people are learning fundamentals of melee while playing the game, because it's
Yeah.
great for field awareness, but there are other things you can kind of add in there to make it slightly more interesting, especially once you've played it 30 times in a melee season. Oh. All right, let's jump over to Mateo real quick about what does your typical small group local practice look like?
Whom are you asking?
You.
Oh, sorry, I got up to turn the light on because it's getting a little dark in the room. So I'm lucky enough to be in a fairly large barony. So I'm in Bjornsborg, which is mundanely San Antonio, and is only about 90 minutes south of Austin, which is another large group of a lot of intense fighters. And so, while typically our typical Wednesday practice doesn't usually involve melee, when we do get together for a melee practice, it's usually because people have come down to Austin to see us, or we've gone up to Austin to see them, although they come down to us more than we do them, unfortunately, which is on us. However, so when I'm running one of those practices, my goal is to mostly work on what I'm going to say, like, is your grunt fighter, right? So like your, this is not your already a hot stick, already a like Don mod, whatever, right? This is just like these people have been authorized for like a year or not even at all, like they're brand new. And that's what I typically focus on. It's found over the years that if your average level fighter has certain capabilities in a larger melee, your overall army will be doing much, much better than if you have like some hot sticks and like everybody else doesn't know what the hell they're doing. So I typically focus on that. And I focus on aggression and shaping the field, them learning how to shape the field for their advantage, and instilling courage in them to not be afraid of high-level fighters, but instead to learn how to work us and how to take us out. And I focus on making sure that they're flanking and not getting flanked. So those are my primary focuses. Once we have a shared common language, which Natalya touched on earlier, once we have that shared common language down, that's what I'm focusing on: grunt level fighters, and working those just like basic general skills to win a fight.
Okay, very, very cool. So we've got kind of a basic idea of what something like would typically look like in each of your kingdoms, and we kind of want to dive a little bit more into some of the things you stated when you were kind of painting these pictures for us. So I'm going to jump back to Jervel first, because I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit more about the idea of your core concepts, your pair trio. Could you define that and kind of go into that a little bit more for us?
Well, a pair is simply two fighters working together.
Okay.
Whether they're working together against a single fighter, another pair, or a trio. And when you get three fighters fighting together, it's a trio. Tactics for the trio are a little different than the pair. But when you get four, now you have two pairs. When you have six, now you have two trios, and it just keeps scaling up.
What are the tactics for a trio? And how do you work those differently from a pair?
Well, a pair, for example, you can have a shooter-killer drill where one person is designed to bind and make openings for your partner to hit. That's really what it is. It's one person making opportunities for their buddy to take advantage. So me as a mod, I can jump out there and say, "Ooh, look at me, I'm scary," throw some shots out there, not really trying to hit. And people tend to freak out and either run away, or when I retreat back to my partner, come in very, very aggressively. And my partner is set up and ready and expecting that and can get those kills. So it's a very safe way for me to engage a line of fighters. And that's one of the things we do with the pair is we start to identify the natural abilities of each fighter on our line. And we start to pair them up with either very similar or very different people. We have two aggressive people. They tend to work better together, so about to flank. Very, very timid new fighters or just very defensive oriented fighters You know, they're not going to do well stuck in the command position, the lead position. So you pair them up with a more advanced fighter, but they can do great with the simple goal of, I'm going to shoot. Someone's going to chase me when I come back. It is your job to hit their head when they stick it forward. They can respond, they can adapt, and they can break down the giant concept of a melee into those little pieces so much better.
Oh, very cool. It kind of sounds a bit like you're teaching them almost what we'd call here skirmisher tactics. The small micro focus, whether it's on a line or whether it's out in the backfield. It's very much what we're training with foxes and hounds.
So what do you do with the trio?
The trio is more oriented around the cross shots. Where you're not trying to fight the person who's directly in front of you. My main objective is to really block that person, and I'm throwing lots of shots at the people on my diagonals. So if I'm in the middle of the 3-fighter, I'm going to throw shots at the diagonal, hoping the person in the middle will, and anytime the person right in front of me throws a shot, it's my job to block it down and open it up so my buddies can hit it. Also with the trio, we look at opportunities for one of the people in the trio to break off and become a flanker, and that leaves us back to our pair with a flanker.
Okay, so basically when you're teaching a pair, you're teaching them how to work well with like a battle buddy, but when you're teaching a trio, you're teaching them how to work as almost a line unit. From the sound of it, how to engage another unit basically instead of an individual. Cool. Very cool. Another follow-up we kind of wanted to ask on, if you can't tell, Wistric and I totally have a super secret moderator chat going. Sometimes you'll see me typing like a zombie, but the next one I wanted to follow up on was with Mateo. You said you work with the grunt fighters at your local practice, and you define the grunt fighters as being your average Joe fencer bro. The newer guys, or the ones who may not be as seasoned on the field. You mentioned aggression and training that, as well as shaping the field and not being afraid of Mr. Mod Fancy Pants or whatever white scarf, bronze ring ogre out there. So how do you train aggression? How do you teach these guys to not be afraid?
If you ask me how I do it, the way that I do it is I typically will take a group of new fighters who are interested in melee, and I have like an intro to melee class. And that the beginning of that intro to melee class, they're not even armed. They're actually just themselves. They don't have masks or anything on, right? And I teach them like, okay, so I just have them line up across each other, and I'm like, I'm gonna call Leon, and I want you guys to advance until you're in distance, and if you hear a hold, just stop, right? And then they advance into the distance. Typically, they're just like, and they're walking in, right? Which is a typical response. At which point I send them back, and I'm like, all right, now I want you to like stare death arrows at the person across from you, laser beams from your eyes. I want you with your eyes on their eyes to promise absolute destruction to them and walk at them as if you're going to kill them, right? And that typically changes like the attitude of their walk, okay? And it gets them into a mode of go get these guys. And after that, I start talking about maneuvers. So I start talking about what a flank is and how to take a flank. And then I make them, again, nobody's armed. They're just like getting into position, get to those places instantly. So like, and we just drill it and run it. All right, you guys are going to flank 1, 2, 3. Well, as soon as somebody says break, you guys break out and go, right? And if they're not moving fast enough, I get in there and make them move faster, et cetera, and try to get them into an attitude of acting first and causing their opponent to react, a little bit like fencing. So yeah, that's how I do that. And aggression is just a point that I keep hitting. And I don't want that to be understood as like unsafe aggression, like being mean or being big bullies on the field. I mean, like taking the ground that you want to take, maintaining the ground that you want to take, and forcing the opponent, the enemy, your opponent's not really enemies, into a disadvantageous position because you're the one has the initiative all the time. So that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, no, that makes perfect sense. It's like when training to break a kill pocket, or training to people to advance in general, which is what you just pointed out, but you don't want them to forget everything they learned to authorize when engaging that line like crazy people. So I think we kind of we've touched on this a little bit. Oh, we've touched on this a little bit. We've touched some drills, we've touched some book learning, we've touched on throwing people at each other in various groups. What are some other ways you guys work on things? And what does that look like in your various practices? I'm going to open it up to the entire floor for this one because we've kind of singled people out as we were going, and I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. But talk to me about some of those things that make your practices worthwhile. Feel free to go ahead.
I guess I can start. So we kind of developed a developing practice. So we start with the beginnings of melee and just learning terms and stuff. But some of the things we then go to is small group practice, actually a lot like Jervel was talking about. We do very similar things, making sure the individuals learn what they're most comfortable at and what they're good at. So often we'll find someone who is maybe doesn't want to move as much, but they feel as though they should be out front running. And we're like, no. We have a place for you. Here's a great place for you and what you should be doing. And here's a way that you can feel like you're making a benefit without having to be the person running out. And then we have the person who loves to run out and go all over the place. And we're like, okay, we're going to focus that energy on something productive so that you aren't getting lost all the way in the side. So that's kind of our next level workup. And then we actually go to larger group tactics, things that we focus on more at wars and things that you'll hear there, things that only work with really larger groups. And we try to replicate it. And sometimes it's, our practice is 15, 20 people, and we'll have 15 of those people on one line and 5 of the other, just to kind of replicate how it looks when there's a much bigger line. So that's some of the things we do with the individuals. And we also set up tactics, and we did this actually with in Atlantia, driven by our current war, our current general. And one of the things they did that I liked and we kind of done before is they had people, they had the more experienced fighters specifically take a detriment or not help in a certain situation to allow the ones who have not done as much melee to see what happens when, let's say, a command is given and not everyone follows through on the command. And so they're being told do this, but they don't really understand why. And so one of us would just not. And of course, the line gets destroyed. And it gives them a chance to see, oh, no, that really happens. Like, we're not kidding when we say you have to step forward, everyone has to step forward. Or any other variations of that. But we try to do a lot of different things, so it's not the same practice all the time.
And we're back from that unplanned technical interruption then.
Yep, and we were just following up with Natalia, who was going over some of the things about what makes her practice memorable and useful. We also got a couple of questions from the audience in our chat, which we wanted to kind of touch on once. Natalia, if you had any thoughts to finish, if you don't completely understand, technical interruptions are fun.
I actually did manage to finish right before that interruption.
All right, so the first question we got was actually a follow-up from Colette, where she asked about, does the tactic of teaching aggression work for women? So I think we should direct that to Mateo, as the talking about training aggression was kind of his thing. So Mateo, what do you think? Would this work for women too, and how would you modify it?
Yeah, and she mentioned women and anybody else who are like women who might feel this way, or anybody really who might feel this way, who might feel a little bit more timid or a little bit more less aggressive, or might not have like a background in sort of like martial arts or something along those lines. I think which you might have been getting at. But one of the reasons I teach this way is precisely because of this, because most people don't actually have that natural sense of aggression and ownership of the field in a melee. We sort of like kind of go all together and hope the person to our right or left knows what they're doing and can go in there and do that. So one of the reasons I train that way and take the weapons and the masks off everybody's face, masks off everybody's head and the weapons out of everybody's hands, is so that there's no stakes when it comes to the fight itself. Nobody's getting shots thrown at them. Nobody's having to worry about throwing shots at anybody else. It's strictly about giving them the space to explore what it is to be aggressive, and giving them the space to explore what it is like to live on the edge of their envelope, and whatever that envelope is, whatever size that envelope is, and getting them to a place where they're willing to like make a commitment and move, right? So that when eventually you put the weapon in their hand, they already feel a little more confident about being out on the field and presenting a strong sort of like aggressive push. And one of the things I teach is like, I try to tell people it's okay to lie about that. It's okay to pretend that you're aggressive. It's okay for it to be complete bullshit, because that will draw you into a space that's a little bit further out on the edge of your comfort zone, which is where you want people to be in a melee, is sort of on the outer edge of their comfort zone.
I absolutely feel that in my bones. When I'm on the melee field, I pretend I'm 10 feet tall, and it seems to work just fine.
Yeah, I'm gonna add that fake it till you make it really is a thing there. Until you believe you can do it, how can you possibly achieve a thing?
Whoever gets there first and whoever has control of the space wins the melee. So if you can get a group of 15 people, no matter how new they are, to get like 10% into that world, you're already 10% closer to victory.
Colette observed that what you're talking about sounds like public speaking training. And Mateo, I was wondering if you have experience public speaking?
I do teach voice and diction as one of the classes that I teach, but I'm a theater guy, so
it's the theater guy that I was thinking of. Like, you're up there talking about acting. It's like
it is in many ways acting. Like, take an action, make a choice. Strong and wrong, right, is better than nothing.
That explains your question before we started recording. You and I will have to geek out a little bit because I missed that world.
Mateo's answer. I think calling it aggression is perhaps not the most accurate way of describing what you're going for. So you're not trying to be individually grr. You are training a unit to move together and execute essentially a technique. So you're just executing your thing on the field, and you're going to go through your opponent, regardless of, it's not about being like personally grr. It's just show up, do the thing. And I do kind of want, what?
I don't know. I do also kind of want personal grr eventually out of my army. Like, I want that fighting spirit from them too, but that's something that develops, I think, over time.
Yeah, I think that's something that's a little bit more of a, how do we develop individual fighters and is going to translate?
Yeah.
Not really being confident in themselves, but that's different from the unit is doing a thing and you're part of it now. Don't worry about yourself.
Yep. I would agree.
And I also add, we do a very similar drill. We line up lines, they go past each other. They just don't break stride and they walk past each other. But one of the things we do is we have them, when they enter measure, yell bang, like they have finger guns to make it a little funny.
Nice.
But also to train that you're angling over that sword line, even when you're not armed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll add that it's really more about confidence and knowing what to do when you encounter a thing. So one of the reasons why we break down melee into itty-bitty little parts, we show the shooter blocker drill. So when they see me come in with that giant overblown block, they say, oh, now's the time to give that aggression and that confidence and to go forward and take those shots. So they've seen it in training over and over and over again. So when they see it on the field, they just respond without thinking about it.
Yep, and I think that is kind of at its core what we're doing when we're drilling, when we're talking about these things, when we're forcing people to run up to each other with finger guns and go bang. So let's just kind of generally open it up one more time and ask a little bit more about why your practices are effective, why they're special. Is it the drills? Is it the book learning? Is it the just throwing them out there and getting practical experience? Is it a combination? So Natalya started. I won't put you on the spot again. Let's jump over to Mateo with that one.
Not just in locally, but just in over the course of time. I think the thing that makes a rapier a melee practice special, if you can generate it, is community. So trying to create a group of people who begin to come to rely on one another as comrades in arms, in a way that goes beyond just like this melee, to try to get them away from worrying about who won and who lost to worrying about how they're all, even against each other, collectively improving. And I think changing it, transitioning away from individuals, this is going to be probably a point of ideological contention with some folk, but getting them away of thinking as individuals, but instead as collective honor and collective fun and collective experience really makes it worth their time. Worth their time and really special for them. So that's what we do. We try to create some, and then go out and like have burgers afterwards or something like that, and like chit chat about what happened and make that social aspect of it a piece of that is what we try to do locally and regionally in Ansteorra now.
I was about to follow up. I was about to ask how we do that, but I think you just hit the nail on the head with both making sure to shake things up enough at practice so it doesn't feel like people are constantly either losing or winning. Right. And also going out for burgers after. We have a joke here, the team that drinks together wins, or eats together depending on their age.
There's some truth there's truth to that, I think.
I agree, absolutely agree.
One of my running theories, and this is as having run practices, having been a seneschal, having been a baron, is that the SCA is a social club where we put on funny clothes and play weird sports, but it's the social club that keeps us together strong, and that ultimately the social activity is eating together.
So we actually have a question kind of following up for this realm that I've opened up from the audience, and that is, do the panelists have a preference between drilling consistent group actions or training specifically for attentiveness and responsiveness in the middle of combat? Which is a really great question because it depends. So,
well, I can answer. To me, when we start a brand new fighter, we start with consistent drilling. And then as they become more confident in that, and they have the ability to look up from their little tunnel vision that most of us get when we are brand new and start seeing the whole field, that's when we move them to more of the theory of combat and to more responsiveness and attentiveness.
Does anyone disagree? Does anyone agree or want to add anything to that in our panel? Mateo. Mateo, go ahead.
I agree. I think with new people, giving them specifics gives them something to be grounded on and gives them something to feel confident and strong. And I think that's really great. I really don't like over drilling specific command actions because I feel like rapier combat in melee isn't about that. And if one group of people is like worried about like how many steps they're being told to take and how many shots they're being told to throw, they're getting killed by the people who don't care and just know to move and know how to work together and out skirmish them. So I typically avoid like heavy drilling, which culturally where I'm at right now is kind of a problem because this is a kingdom that has a long history of like Ansteorra one step, Ansteorra one step, Ansteorra one step, which is like really hard to break people of because it gets you, there's a whole melee manual that's based on the armored combat field that we have in this kingdom that has this big broad list of commands like how to wheel right and how to wheel left. I'm like, that's not how rapier plays out. Rapier plays out like that. And it's about responsiveness and being able to flow with people and being able to communicate with people sort of almost not psychically, but you know what I mean, right? Mm-hmm. To have that sense with each other, to move together and to trust each other. That's what I try to drill instead, because I think if you get overzealous in like really intense, very specific group movement and group action, you're kind of screwed.
Okay, so the next question that I wanted to open up with is, so how do you make this stuff stick? How do you keep this with your combatants? And I'm gonna ask Natalya and Gavin to answer this one because they haven't spoken quite as much. So how do you make it stick for your combatants? Do you just talk about it? Do you have handouts? Do you have a manual? Like, is it just drilling? What can you do?
So, yeah. So I'm gonna paste my manual right here. So that's our kingdom manual. It's 4 pages with 2-inch margins.
All of Calontir's enemies can now go read all of their secrets.
Well, you could also read Wistric's website and you'd have most of them. But I
bet this is like more straightforward than
Oh yeah.
400 posts.
Kind of my answer to both of the last two questions too is that one part of it is certainly getting your melee and get your endurance down. You need an army that can actually fight for an hour, or the ravine's going to be terrible. And it's hard to get people to push themselves beyond their comfort zone on that front. But skills-wise, I think we frequently get caught on executing like some grand maneuver as the skills we're thinking about for melee, which I think was what Mateo was just talking about. And that's not really what the useful melee skills are. It's things like seeing the angles, covering yourself when you're, say, in a line fight, following through when you kill somebody, or falling back and you know, reforming effectively. Like those are the actual skills you want to train. So in the 4-page manual I just gave you, we literally have only 5 commands. I expect everyone to only know 3 of them, and the first one is fall back and the second is rally. So there's really only one thing that is a command to be drilled until you're getting pretty good.
I have to agree with everyone in the chat, by the way. Gavin's document, yoinks, and away. Natalya, you're next. Same question.
So I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Meridian manual that created was only about 2 pages, plus a little images, and it was a handful of commands. It also included basic melee rules, like societal rules and kingdom rules. And that was mostly it, including some small tactics and large tactics description so people could read it. And the idea was for people who needed to read something before they saw it. But to the heart of your question, how do you people maintain it? You have fun. Like, who wants to work out at a gym? Okay, some people do. Some people really do. They get the drive from like, yeah, I'm gonna do the same thing. Yeah, no, I need to have fun. And so we do all kinds of wacky games and playing melee, and you know, especially with the group, Gage and I, and especially if we had a visitor who was more skilled, it would be like 3 of us on everyone, because of course our students would love to take the turn to beat the crap out of us. So it'd be fun for them. Or any kind of, we've done like a zombie type game, anything like that that allows them to use those skills in different ways was really the benefit. And I think part of that is if you always do the same thing, like 5-on-5, it's hard to come up with new ideas or see new things because you see it in the same way. So really just having fun, and then spreading the word. So here we go to 2 to 3 different practices. And actually thanks to Colette, who attends several practices, and some of our other people, and they talk about it and they go, oh yeah, we did this melee thing and we did this fun game. Yeah, you should check it out. And so they do that and they're like, oh, that's cool. That sounds way more fun than like, do this, then do that. And so it kind of spreads. It also helps when you have the tournaments and you have a group from a local group, like we did in Meridies. I was at the Barony Brunmatic and we kicked butt on those 5-on-5. And so everyone's like, how are you guys so good? Because none of our fighters were, aside from Gage at the time, were particularly skilled. And it was just that we drilled into them, if nothing else, consistency in listening to commands. And then the willingness to call commands, and we would listen regardless of who was calling out. But yeah, having fun kind of spreads the word and gets more and more people doing it. And that means you get to do it more at events and have fun.
Okay, so we're gonna follow up later on those wacky games because you got both Wistric and I going about it. So start thinking on some fun ones that you can tell the audience, because I'm going to ask you about it later, and this is your heads up.
Hey, thanks for
All right, so the next question, just real quick, keep it nice and brief for each panelist. How frequently do you practice melee, and what does your typical melee season look like? I know, so for example, here in the mid, we try to do once February hits, melee season has started, and then once August is done, melee season has ended. And we start practicing at our local practices and whatnot, but we also do one regional practice every summer in each region, and then one giant practice, and then Pensic, because War Kingdom. So what does your melee season look like? And I'm just gonna go across the list as it kind of shows up on my Zoom. So Gavin, you're first.
So, all right, so Calontir really goes to Gulf Wars and doesn't really go to Pensic much. So our big melee training happens in February. We have an event where we rent a indoor soccer facility. So we get a full half soccer field to do stuff. That usually gets about 30 fighters. We also have 2 additional kingdom level war practices that have only kind of had rapier, cut and thrust melee stuff going on intermittently throughout the years. And then say Lilies, which is our big war, we have been doing more experimental melee. So they're not, there's no war points at Lilies. So a lot of it's like, hey, there's 10 of us, let's play around. Which is, I think, sometimes a different attitude than a lot of kingdoms have. But we're hoping now that the cut and thrust melees are an official thing that we can have in the practices more, because we can now do it with 3 people instead of 4, which were required, and any martial instead of a very specific set that will help.
Okay, excellent. That sounds awesome. And some of those experimental melees at Lily's sound like they would be a blast.
As the person from the kingdom that is the most war points matter kingdom.
Hey, I am not typical.
He's not wrong.
I really want to go. Sounds really fun. All right, Mateo.
A war of experimenting? Sure.
So Ansteorra's melee culture is developing over the years, and now we're trying to get more practices in, but truthfully, everybody's like, oh crap, Gulf Wars isn't in 2 months, we should probably have some practices, and then we do that. That's changing now. So we're doing more regional practices, and we're having a specific event that's devoted to rapier melee, but that's all relatively in the last few years. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. And then some groups are way into it, like the North, which is Oklahoma, and points sort of in just the south side of the Red River in Texas. They've always had kind of a pretty strong rapier culture, melee culture, but now in the south and central regions, we're starting to get more and more of it. So it's developing, but yeah.
Awesome. That actually sounds really fun too. And you have a really good opportunity to build up what you want to see in your melee culture. So I'm kind of geeking out about watching what happens there. Natalya, you are next on my little row.
I must have missed something. I didn't realize there's a melee season.
Okay. Atlantia, stop bragging.
Well, okay.
Actually,
she's only been in Atlantia 2 years. Is she Atlantean?
No, that was Meridies.
But Meridies.
Meridies.
She's not wrong, because Meridies we have Gulf Wars and Fool's War, and then Foxes and Castle Wars. So maybe spring. Maybe spring.
It's not just that. It was because you also have down by Pensacola. There's a big war. Yep, there you go. It wasn't that. It's part because where Meridies is, we could do an outdoor practice in the middle of winter. One of the things that I did when I was in charge, I push the regions to actually have regional practices. And so each region would have its own. It was north, middle, and south. And then we did a competition where we got the north and the middle to meet, and that was a regional practice. And then we had the middle and the south to meet, and that was a regional practice. And we kind of turned it into some fun to see what group. And of course, there's a local or a regional general, I don't remember the term now, that was in charge of pushing the melee there. So we kind of did it all the time, and then we had a lot of fun with it. So and especially in our practice, sure, it would die down for a couple of weeks here and there, especially in midwinter, if it was cold and we were more indoor. But even indoors, for the most part, we'd kind of forget about it for a couple of weeks, and someone's like, hey, we haven't done melee in a while. And so we would do it again. So there really wasn't a season. Although I will say before Gulf Wars and a little bit before Penzik, we wouldn't miss weeks. There wouldn't be a gap so much, but yeah, otherwise all the time. And we're kind of doing that here too until, COVID.
I am super jealous. I wish we could do melee all the time.
Like I said, sometimes it's just one round at the end of practice. Before everyone cleans up, we'd stop 15 minutes before we're out and go, hey, who's up for melee? Also make sure that if people are tired, and then they still have to fight melee.
On the other hand, like the mid still shows, like posts all those videos from Ursulmas or whatever, where you're indoors and there's plenty of room for fighting and lots of people fighting. While we are still, if we want to fight, there's snow because it's.
Well, it's snowy here too.
that was easier about Meridies, where snow wasn't really an issue.
And
except like the 3 weekends it is that always managed to be, right event weekends. Yeah.
And Outlands is over there like, you didn't drive 6 feet through the snow 10 ways.
Tone pass is the thing.
Which passes were closed on the route to get to the event this week?
Uh-huh.
All right, so Jervel, what does your typical melee season look like? How frequently do you practice?
We also have a melee season, although ours revolves around Australia War, which is in February, March, where we do most of our, pretty much weekly, we'll do very drill-oriented melees. And in the summer, we do it randomly when it's into practice, similar to Natalya, and just that's 20 minutes of a fun, non-training, just for the shits and giggles of it, fighting.
That sounds awesome. Oh man, I miss melee. I'm gonna dream about it tonight. It's gonna be amazing. All right, so I've already warned the panelists, like we're hoping to touch a little bit about like practical practices and drills and wacky games and all that in a bit. But the first thing, we want to go back a little bit more theoretical here. And Gavin, your time to shine is about to happen. We want to kind of touch on how do you train at a regional or an army level? How do you build your rapier army in your kingdoms? And we have a range of kingdoms here. We have war kingdoms to slightly smaller kingdoms who don't really necessarily care as much about the war points as the men. Not that anyone does. Say that without a love in my heart for my kingdom. But how do you so first I'm going to open up to everyone. How do you finally mix all your units, all this training we've talked about, all these smaller practices, smaller melee events? How do you mix your units to form one army? What do you train? What do you focus on? Let's just open the floor. I think Mateo has something to say. I'm seeing the little tick.
You mentioned Gavin first. I don't want to jump in front of him if you want to.
All right, well, then I'll ask Gavin.
Gavin's had like an extra bonus plus on this. So we talk about like, how do you training an army that already exists?
Right.
Or, yeah.
Right. We're going to ask Gavin how you build it from the bottom up and then do follow-ups with y'all. So don't you worry. He will have his time to shine. I'm giving him his 5 minutes to think on this before we go. Gavin, spill your heart out to the known world. So first I'm going to ask you three,
Sure.
Mateo, Natalya, and Jervel. How do you build your army cohesion?
So, oh man, right? So I've seen a few different, this is a big answer. I'm take a little time. So I've seen that a few different places. The first army that I helped build was Mid-Realms army, because when I started fighting melee, we would bring mid-realm fighters to wars, and we would be armed with daggers because we didn't have épées, because épées were banned. We didn't even have royalty join us on the field until pretty late in the game. Mm-hmm. So building an army in that case was actually building a unit, and then having that having that unit succeed. And not only succeed, but succeed in a way that was inspiring to other people and made them want to join us and fight with us. And once we'd achieved that, we continued to increase the size of people who were devoted to it. And then royalty started showing up. And then the inclusion of royalty brought on the inclusion of crossover fighters who learned that it was fun to do what we do and not stupid. And then they joined us and things got bigger. So, but that was a process that began at a certain period of time in the SCA, and that time has largely passed. Most kingdoms have royalty with them, and it's all great, and all that stuff has gone away, and all that is already a thing. Going to North Shield, that was a natural outcropping of that process. Sustaining it, though, was about creating a wider army identity that didn't relate to the small unit that I was a part of, which was the Hellhounds. The Hellhounds started it, but then creating a wider army identity. And this is actually credited to a heavy fighter, Circadian, who came up with the term "one kingdom, one army." And that was this idea that everybody fights together regardless of the weapons that are in our hand. And trying to sustain that culturally was a pretty big, heavy lift. But it was really important, because what that meant was, like, we came to war, and we, this whole kingdom, took up arms and fought. And that created a group identity. What I found at Ansteorra is that this was a place that was for a very long time, and still is in many ways, that same army of heroes concept, which is to say very individual. But we started losing a lot. And that broke down our kingdom cohesion in a way that has caused us to have to rethink our army of heroes idea, because we just keep getting beat, people don't show up, and so you have to fix that, and you have to start from the ground up and build up a group identity that is about a group heroism and a group thing. So it's been different in every place that I've been, but it is really about creating an identity that goes beyond the field. It's about celebrating group success. It's about having an ideology on the field that is about placing honor and integrity ahead of victory. I think that's really important to creating and sustaining that group identity. Victory will come, but sustaining it helps. People have to want to fight for you and want to fight with you. So, and I'm kind of rambling now. I'll shut up.
So as a former anthropology major, what it sounds like you're saying is you have to really build up the culture before you can start
100%. It's culture.
Thing.
Yep.
All right. That's
100%.
excellent perspective. Sorry, Natalia, jumping to you.
No, not at all. I just, I really want to build on Mateo. I have a different perspective, but I think it builds exactly on what you said. So really I saw that in Meridies, and the way we did it there was Gage and I had been going to Gulf Wars for years and years as part of North Shield before that. And so we went to Gulf Wars, and very few people, namely Corbin and Izzy, Morgan, Ironheart, a few of them had gone to Gulf Wars and would fight in the rapier, but there wasn't really a Meridies army, so it was kind of almost easier there. We went there one year, and we came back and told a bunch of people all these war stories, just people hanging out, and they're like, oh, that's cool. Well, the next year we of course took our students, our cadets, and now we had a larger group, and again, they had a great time just going to war and fighting the rapier melee. And so they came back and would tell all these stories, and it just got larger and larger until all of a sudden Meridies was fielding 40 to 50 fighters, and all of it, and now we're a kingdom doing this, and all of it was because they heard of some of our personal success on the field. And okay, it definitely helps to have someone like Gage who is a hero, and people see him that way because he does amazing things, to also go, that is awesome. But just the love and the joy that we had when we talked about it. So that's one that I saw and was a part of building, but actually one of the coolest things I ever remembered was when I started in North Shield and went to Gulf Wars, and I still can feel that joy in my heart of, I am proud to be North Shield. And forever will be proud to be a part of that kingdom. And one of the things that Mateo personally did, and I don't know how it started, but I just remember being the person who was there. When we went to war, he would sing an amazing battle. And of course, all of us would know the song. And so we would go into war all singing our hearts out. And it's just this incredible feel. And I never got to be a part of the Hellhounds, but we would have a North Shield tabard, and it got us, like, I felt like, for those of us who play D&D, like I had a +1 charisma that I could do anything. And one of North Shield's thing was, this is my bleep, this is my goddamn land, and you're not taking it. And it was that aggression you first talked about, but that sense of pride And it didn't matter how many times I got killed or how many times I had to run my ass back. I was going to do it for that kingdom. And I think Meridies was on the edge of building that too when Bart and Oda were the crown, and they fought with us on the rapier field, but they also challenged the knights to join the rapier community and challenge the rapier community to join the knights. And so we took war practice that traditionally was mostly knights, and we went there for rapier and help people get authorized. We're like, you know what, we'll meet this challenge. And so we worked with them, we got them authorized and had a blast. And I think that was the beginning of Meridies really starting to get that culture of, this is freaking awesome and we should be proud of our kingdom. And I hope, I mean, I've left and so I can only hear stories, but I hope that the current crowns as they go to war also show up and show that kind of pride and joy. You know, walking into battle with the song is just freaking amazing. And Mateo, you did it so well. And that'll be one thing I hold dear to my heart forever, that allows me to just love Melee.
I really miss doing that, actually. That's something I miss a lot. Bards matter. Have a good bard. If I have to add anything, have a good bard that sings songs that people like want to sing and like tell story, and make sure that you have storytellers with you. I'm not the only storyteller in that group. Everybody in that group is a good storyteller.
Oh no, the stories were incredible.
Yeah, but like all of
great.
that, it all creates culture and lifts everybody up together.
And everyone telling stories of like, no shit, there I was, best ever, and it gets you through until the next war, and everyone itching to get their own no shit, there I was story.
Don't you worry, we're gonna get to the no shit, there I was story portion of this evening. It's how we end every cast we do. But first, I'm gonna jump over to Jervel, who's been sitting there patiently, and ask, no worries. This is great. This is exactly what we want. We want dialogue. We want the flow of ideas, and we want to see where you take us. That's why we choose you guys. And don't try to micromanage the questions too much. But we're going to jump over to Jervel, and we're going to ask about unit cohesion. How do you convince Kerta to work well with Alberon? Like, how do you make an army?
Well, that's kind of the funny thing. We also have the songs and the tabards and, you know, the fighting for the honor of your unit, but we've never really got it whole kingdom wide. Maybe it's because outside of the fact that our kingdom is freaking huge. So all of our unit cohesion is based around the barony or the household, where we take a lot of pride of me and my household is going to go and kick the crap out of Alberon's household. And through that competition, we rise. Of course, at the end of the day, we all go to the campfires and are both telling those wonderful war stories and no shits there I was. But it's not really a kingdom-wide pride. It's more of a pride from my barony. And all those stories about how, even though we have this great diversity between, or this almost animosity, not quite, between Alberon and Kerta, we bring that together when we go to Estrella and turn that towards whoever our enemy is. And that mostly works for us.
All right, that's an excellent perspective on that. Very succinct.
But it takes 16 hours for our northern barony to drive to our southernmost barony, so you don't really get very strong kingdom unity with doing that.
I'm just glad we don't have anyone on the east on here right now, because they'd be telling us about how many. Yeah, no, 16 hours. It's like 6 to the northern border of Meridies for me. Mm-hmm. It's good to live. Wow.
It's good perspective.
Good to live in a smaller kingdom. Yeah.
I still remember being laughed at because I day tripped from my mother's house to an event in Denver, which was a 7-hour drive. And I remember someone laughing at me and going, yeah, that's barely a day trip. Like, what are you complaining about? Mm-hmm. When I was in Eastie? All right, so Gavin, it is your time to shine. We've gotten some excellent interkingdom perspective, anthropology, whatever you want to call it, from Jervel, Natalya, and Mateo. But you have a very interesting perspective with how Calontir has adopted rapier. how do you build an army from the ground up?
So I think I'll give a little backstory because I don't know if everyone watching this is going to know the history. So Calontir's entire steel weapons fighting program was only officially created in 2013. So a lot of the people in this video have been fighting for longer than that, some of them for far longer than that. So we both had the situation of having no real, rapier army for wars, in part because there weren't any fighters, because it wasn't a program up until a few years ago. But also, this has an added layer to it where you don't have a depth of skill within the fighters you have in your kingdom either, right? So, so even, I know Meridies has been involved in the last few years of really growing their, melee army, but they still had people like Wistric and David Koblenz who were highly skilled fighters to just bring into the fold. So we had none of that either. So I moved to Calontir in 2015, and that year's Gulf Wars, I was still in Atlantia, but I was writing my dissertation, so I missed it. Calontir fielded 2 fighters, I think, in the Gulf Wars melees total. And I think there's a video of them running as a pair through the ravine while Mint Julep's on the veranda was happening, because our kingdom throws a party during the Rapier ravine battle. Because historically, there haven't been any Calontir fighting, so they could all watch. It's right in the back of our camp. And so the first challenge was you had to get numbers, right? So if nobody shows up, then it doesn't matter how skilled they are. There's no army. And so we sort of started some really recruitment. We got 9 fighters that next year. So that was, I think, the Gulf NATO year. We had a lot of people who had agreed to kind of fight, and then we had like 1 battle, and then everything else got rained out. So they were planning on coming later, and that didn't work out. And that year I engaged in a cruel campaign of cornering knights and younger armored fighters at post-rebels and at parties, and saying, well, if I bring gear for you, can we get you authorized, and will you come fight some of the rapier melees too? Which actually worked really well. Not in a broad advertisement, but bending them over the barrel and then going, hey, look, I brought a mask and a sword. So that year, I think I brought 8 sets of loner gear that following year to put people in. And so we got our numbers up to 22, I think, that year. I was actually general. The following year, we had about 17, and then this past year, we had 27. And so we've gone from 2 fighters to, I think, the 3rd or 4th largest army at Gulf Wars within 4 years. So that's kind of been a lot of where that aspect of recruiting then turns into what Natalya was talking about, is people go, they fight, they have fun, and they want to do it again. They tell their friends, people see them having fun. That's kind of a big part of the numbers. We had a question earlier that was about building an identity. And so Calontir had a couple ready-made parts of its culture that really were helpful. One of which is the idea that there is one army. I mentioned earlier, there's the idea that there are no heroes. And there's also the whole singing thing, right? So for those of you who have never seen Calontir at war, we are constantly singing. We walk to battles singing, we walk away from battles singing, we sit in our camp and sing while the Mid-Realm is trying to hold court until midnight. But that's another the whole kingdom does it sort of thing. So we were able to, really one of the big keys is building the program in a way that matches the kingdom culture and not separately. And so we could totally, when I was talking to people late at night at parties, go, it's one army, right? It's just another weapons form. Which our GOA orders have as a literal requirement is to be authorized and proficient in all of the weapons forms of that thing. And that brings me to another aspect of this is Calontir has a very interesting award structure for fighting activities. So all of the AOA level fighting activities are the feared, and all of the GOA are the feared. And there is a technically separate order for each activity. So there's one for archery, one for equestrian, one for armored combat, and one for steel. And while they are separate orders, they also in some aspects behave as one order. So like we have a feared picnic and it's all of the feared orders running it, right? So as soon as the award order was created, that brought some level of, well, we are all fearedmen, so you're fearedmen too. And you know, that really helped some of the adoption there. And then picking up crowns, picking up royal peers and knights, and then handing them gear and saying, let's go fight more. It's kind of a no shit there I was story, but I think it's relevant here. There was a count that who had said he would come fight, and he was tired from the one battle, and I did the switch out to go fight both. And I asked him, are you going to come out to fight the rapier battle right now? And he was tired, sitting down, still in his armor, sweating, trying to drink some water, and going, nah, I think I'm going to sit this one out. So we line up our rapier army, we march out of camp singing, and we get 60 feet down the road, and he comes running after us, still trying to strip his armor off, out of wait for me. And I think there was a part inside of him that sort of saw the Calontir army marching away without him, that motivated that. And so that's kind of been part of the cultural aspects of building numbers up. From a training perspective, I shared my super simplified manual earlier, and a lot of that's you have fighters who aren't just not good at melee because they've never done melee, but they've been fencing for 3 months. Let's have an entire army of people with maybe a year or two experience as your whole army, and you have to be able to stand on the battlefield against people like Wistric and Mateo and not have them get destroyed. One of our years at Penzig, you know, there were like 10 of us, and we line up, and literally everybody in front of us had a white scarf. Well, actually, it was a bronze scarf or a white collar, because basically the Thieves of Hearts were all in front of us and outnumbered us. Right?
A hard day.
It was not fun.
It's a hard day.
Trying to save off 5 mods at a time is not you have to have something that your fighters can do and control and not just get raffle stomped, because that's no fun. And so that's where I stripped down a lot of the commands, really focused on trying to teach fighters their first goal is to just defend themselves. Second goal is to try to defend their neighbors. Third goal is maybe kill people if the opportunity arises. And these are totally stolen from Wistric. He has a blog that has been dead for a little while, but he has Wistric's rules for warfare, that these are the first few of them. So to really strip it down, to give them something they can do and focus on. Not have a lot of extra stuff like, here's an order you have to follow, trying to clog their brain, because they won't be able to do it. You have 3-5 hours to train them. It's not going to be effective to have them drill because they're not a Napoleonic army. And then to give them maybe the briefest glimpse of a tactical plan. Like, if this is sort of the shape of things, you gotta go, which is the motivation behind that document. So we started out with a lot of just, we're going to try to be at mask time. We're going to do some weird stuff. We're going to get mask time. Here's how alliance fight works. And that's kind of been what our training has then developed, is expanding all those ideas, because the people that were showing up for the practice in 2016 are now the same people showing up in 2020. We did actually get to hold this year. It was our second to last event. And so we now have a body of people who have developed. Now they're the AOA and the GOA level members of our kingdom, and they have 4 or 5 years of war under their belt, and so they can do more interesting things. So there was part of the question about, integrating different units with the whole army. That was, I think, where we started this question. So everybody in the whole army is trained with the same very simple commands, which is really the only thing that's actually do things together is step. And then once you have people who are more skilled, who are getting better at like the field awareness, you start training them to skirmish. Is really the big thing now. So we've shifted from everybody learns this basic thing to everyone learns the basic thing, and now this group, we're going to train you to skirmish. This group, we're going to train you now to be in the reserve and pay attention to what's going on and react. So that's kind of the development of that over the years.
So do you have so you've got a fairly clear view on a cycle time from sort of first time with sword in hand to effective trainer.
Mm-hmm.
And is it 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, so that's sort of too effective to do all the basics. So at least pretty well. I mean, a lot of our line is now focusing on, we have our general tactics are attrition and then overwhelming follow through. Because we don't have, all the people that can just go and blast a hole in a line, personally and individually. So we have to keep people patient and either rely on field positioning or wait for mistakes to happen, kill them for their mistakes, and then when the numbers are, go. No. It's very different than relying on a line of people who mostly kind of have a clue, but then you have your hot sticks that can create scenarios for you.
Or people who think they're hot sticks.
Yeah.
But you don't need hot sticks. You don't need hot sticks. Fuck, hot sticks can be a problem. Like, hot sticks are my problem children when I'm trying to command a line, because they're like, I'm going to go over here and fight these 6 guys. I'm like, get your ass in the line and do your job.
And what I think it was the year, Natalia, that you were commanding. We were the Gulf Force field battle. We were on the left. That was Wolfston's year. No, that was the year before you. Was it? Or the year Wolfston was king, which I think might have been the year before you were commanding. Yeah. Meridies was on the left, and we were over there. We were having ourselves a grand old time because it was like our first year with more than 30 people. And Gavin, you took your 20 Calontir who'd been fighting for 2 years, and you just said advance, 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 and they did because they didn't know any better, and they got the job done, right? Like you walked through the center line, through the center of our noble allies, whoever they were. But that idea of of not having heroes, of not needing hot sticks, but
need them.
If you say advance and the whole line advances.
This is kind of fun though, because it seems like we have an actual common thread here between the people who are building their programs and maintaining their programs in kingdoms where rapier has been a heavy and persistent piece of the culture, to building a new program, which is, it seems like what we're really trying to do is build off the culture and create our own space as melee fighters, as rapier fighters. Strip it down to the basics, and then pair your more experienced fighters with your less experienced fighters to try and get a better baseline. To train people without micromanaging them on the field, because the first rule of melee is there's going to be chaos. There's no way to be like, you shall take 3 steps this way and you shall take 15 steps this way, and then you both stab Wistric because he's being a pain in the butt on the line. There's no possible way to do that. But having heard Gavin's perspective from building from the bottom up to having trainers within 4 years for his groups, I kind of want to bring it back to our other panelists, and I'm going to start with you, Jervel. How do you tailor the resources you have? If you could go, so let's actually start with a more general question. If you could go back in time and change anything about your melee program, what would it be and why?
Irta itself has had a fairly successful melee program. So there's not much I think I would change here. I think we have a good balance between training and bringing that fun and that spunk to melee. what we haven't been able to do is get it to kick off in the rest of the Outlands. So whatever it is that we managed to do here, find a way to make that spread down south and get that changed and going down there.
Okay. No, that's completely fair. If you feel like you have a strong program, but the rest of the kingdom may not, it can be a challenge to spread your joy of melee and your training around.
Yeah. We also took it possibly a little bit the wrong way in the fact that because we were so unit oriented that we built up one very strong unit here, and the rest of the kingdom kind of went, well, we can't beat that, so why do we even try? So we lost a little bit of the momentum we were building up because of that.
Well, and that actually plays off of something Mateo said earlier about making sure with his practices that no one feels raffle stomped. Maybe it was Gavin who said raffle stomped. But building off of things that both Mateo and Gavin have said, that makes total sense. I'm going to jump to Natalya now. If you could go back in time and change something about your melee culture, and let's focus on whichever kingdom you're more comfortable talking about. What would it be and why?
I would go back to Meridies, since that was the one I really helped build rather than just participate in or kind of come in. I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't know how to change anything. Actually, I'd honestly ask some of the people we have, whether it's Shimon or Wistric, someone who's there now. Mine and Gage's whole goal together was, we knew we would probably leave because I was graduating, getting my PhD. And our goal was, when we left, specifically the Barony of Bryn Madic, but also Meridies in general, was that we didn't leave and then everything fall apart. We wanted our barony to continue its success with Rapier. We wanted Meridies to continue to be a force at Gulf Wars. We knew it would kind of go down, but we hoped it would come back up. And so, if anything, I'd ask them if there was something we could have done differently to ensure the lasting, push that we really had started to get going before we had to leave. So,
well, let's ask him. Hey, Wistric, how would you continue training momentum, whether or not you're there? How do you set up a program to succeed?
Okay, so yeah, how far back in time can I go? Because the inflection point I was thinking of is a little way further back.
I left it completely open to interpretation. If I had been Jervel, I might have said something like, maybe we invented teleportation pads so that it wasn't a 16-hour drive from one end to the other.
That would be really helpful. You should do
Let's talk about the basic underlying premise for Gulf Wars, which is Trimaris versus Ansteorra. Which, great, look, we've got Trimaris and Ansteorra. They've got huge, strong melee kingdoms. Meridies doesn't have a war that it has to win. If I could go back in time, I'd make Meridies have to be one of, I guess Glenavon didn't even exist back then, right? So we'd make Glenavon, it would be, one year would be Trimaris versus Meridies. Ansteorra would send some of its people one way, some of the other. Trimaris versus Ansteorra the next year Ansteorra versus Meridies. So that you don't always have the same two kingdoms stomping on each other's throats, but also so that Meridies had a dog in a fight, because I think having that dog in that fight drives pride, whether it's your kingdom against another kingdom, whether it's within your kingdom being the barony that makes or breaks the intra-kingdom war. Having that pride, having that dog in that fight makes it a whole lot easier to get people to turn out, train, go to events, and want to win melees. That said, if I don't get that luxury, I would have had Gage and Natalya move to Meridies 3 years earlier so that I got to show up 3 years after after they did all that work.
Wow, that was the evil Gale.
It was we got a year that was the year before she stepped up as commander. There were 30 people, and that was the first time we'd been over 10.
That was
a while. And then the next year was 40. And that was the year you were in charge. And then I think the year after that was me. And then the year after that you moved. And it was like, well, you know, like if you'd set that standard a few years earlier, like a year after I moved in, then there would be this nice long tradition of it. I wouldn't have to worry about anything. You've done all the work instead of like doing a bit of the work and then running away.
Oh, stab it.
All right. I'm breaking up this fight. I'm breaking up this love fest before someone actually gets hurt. All right, Mateo, you're next. If you could change anything, go back in time, change anything about your melee culture, what would it be?
So in Ansteorra, I would love to have a time machine to go back to the beginning of Gulf War, or help Trimaris get more allies and get a stronger program. Because what really happened, I think, in Ansteorra is we didn't lose a war point for 13 years. So Ansteorra beat Trimaris for 13 years running on the field, in one-on-one competition, all of it. And so in many ways, their war culture never had the opportunity to develop. That is a very simple explanation of a very complex issue in Trimaris. But North Shield, when I was in North Shield, was a pretty much an annual ally of Trimaris. And it was 3 or 4 years of being that ally before we developed an army significant enough in tactics and tactical ideas that won them some battles. The problem was when Trimaris started winning and started beating Ansteorra at Gulf War, Ansteorra's melee culture fell apart, and it has long been in the recovery. So I would go back in time and give Ansteorra better opponents early on, or stronger opponents early on. That's one thing I would do, and I think for North Shield, I would have left a stronger group of people to continue once sort of the leaders of that initial Hellhound / army thing spread out to the 9 winds. All of us kind of moved away in the first like within like a 10-year period. I would have left stronger people to take over that too, so that they could have continued to excel and continue to grow and continue to surpass, and hopefully come to surpass that sort of era in that history. So.
All right, that is actually great perspective too, in touching on some things that I've definitely thought about, being from the East originally, played in Atlantia, played in the Outlands, and then moving to the Mid. Yeah, I'm right there with you on some of those war point questions, and the strength of your opponents. Gavin, so I've got the same question for you, and now you've had time to mull it over. You built that program from the bottom up. If you could go back in time, is there anything you would change how you approached, or are you completely happy? Too soon to tell.
So I mean, what might seem like the low-hanging fruit is just make it older. But I think our newness helps us avoid all the problems that all y'all's kingdoms made with your programs, that you're trying to undo 30 years and some messes. So it's not that. I actually think if I could change things, it would be to unrain out some ravine battles. Because of how much going out, taking the field, being seen taking the field, and having fun doing it really matter for getting people to come back and be wanting to do it more each year. Gulf NATO really hurt because we had just kind of gotten things, all right, we kind of got people, we're going to have this battle. And I think that year we only had like a field battle or something dumb that had like no res. So it was like 3 minutes of fighting. And then nothing, because we didn't get the big res battle, which is really a large part of it. New fighters get comfortable in a res battle. The next year, when we did have the ring battle, literally that probably represented, by 20 minutes in, we had doubled a lot of those fighters' melee time. So, right, that matters. That would be the big one. And just a quick comment, Mateo, when your comment there about training with more people, it seems like our winter war practice is moving down to Kansas City, possibly. So dragging a bunch of Ansteorrans up could be a lot of fun.
Cool.
All right. So Oh, sorry, Mateo, go.
Nope. I was just gonna say that sounds like a lot of fun. Once there's not a global pandemic that wants to kill
Right.
everyone, I'm down.
In the winter. Hey. So, completely hypothetically speaking, what would be a better day of the week for that ravine battle at Gulf Wars, so that if it rains on Friday, it's not we don't have to miss out on it completely.
Any of the dry ones.
Just put
Good
it on a
luck.
dry day, Wistric.
This group will not be the ones who make that decision,
I know.
sadly. It is a complicated series of negotiations that goes into where things happen during that particular week. Most of us just drink heavily while those negotiations go on and hope for the best.
On the other hand, if any royal wants to say they've spoken to their mods and they know what those mods think is best for SCA Rapier Melee, I've got a Zoom chat. I've got mini Zoom chats full of people from across the SCA.
I have a soapbox right back there, and I will hit it, Wistric.
So yeah,
We will never get him off that soapbox.
no,
But
you.
this harkens back to a question. This harkens back to a question we actually got in the chat from Colette, who was asking about Melee Champs teams. But for Colette's background, and as you've heard with the last couple of discussions, it really is the whim of the crown with some of these decisions, which may or may not be the best decision for the Rapier program in the long run or the short term even. Whether it's when a battle happens or who's on the champs team. Some things are out of our control, so we do our best to kind of mitigate it. And some ways we mitigate it is through training, which kind of segues us into my final question, set of questions, I should say, because you're not getting off that easy because it's me. So I kind of want to touch on practical practice scenarios. We've talked about drilling, we've talked about book learning. People have dropped their Melee manuals in the chat, which is freaking awesome. I know Wistric and I are working to get a drill thread started on the Fighting the World Facebook group. But because we have our panelists here tonight.
Oh, no. The drill, the thread is there, and I will be posting that link in the chat in just a minute.
Okay. Well, we have these wonderful panelists who agreed to talk for at least another 20 minutes. So we're going to use them to the best of our ability, which is first I want to touch on what can our viewers do to get better at Melee and what can they bring to their practices? So first we're going to touch on how can individuals train, whether it's usual or the pandemic. Bonus points if you touch on it during the pandemic, since we're kind of stuck here for a little bit. And then the next thing I want to touch on is what can small practices do, even large practices. What can practices do in general? What can people bring home with them once we're out of quarantine? So I'm not going to open up the field. We're going to keep this structured. Let's start with the individual questions. How can individuals train for Melee? What can they do usually? Like, let's say they have a practice, and if this goes into like small unit games, that's fine, but let's try to keep it focused on the individual if you can. And bonus points if you can answer how they can do this in a pandemic too. So let's start with Jervel, since you've been so quiet.
Training for the individual in Melee is really very difficult because by definition it's 20 on 20 people, but there's a whole lot of theory that you can run through your head or even on pieces of paper. You can make a little board game on your head and put little pieces out and say, this is my scenario, how can I move my units around to accomplish this? I've actually had a couple people over my house during pandemic to do this, and we would get like literally quarters, nickels, dimes, and pennies to represent powerful units, and I'll move my quarter, which is my mod, around, and I'll send out, and my opponent will send out their 5 little pennies, which are their total noobs, and move these pieces around the board so you can kind of start to understand the theory that goes with what your units are doing on the field.
Very cool. I can definitely get behind doing play tests with small figurines, and I know Wistric can with his little sea creatures and pirates now, I think.
We have upgraded to Funko Pops.
God, you're classy. Natalya, you're next. What can an individual do to train for melee?
Depends on their skill level, but there's always stuff to do. If you are on the newer side, field awareness, which means awareness all the time. When you're walking, wherever you're going, totally pandemic doable. Being self-aware of what you're doing so that you don't end up getting in someone else's way when you're trying to parry or do something else. And then just being aware of all the things happening around you. It's impressive how many people who have fought melee a long time and still have no clue what's happening around them. And not only tripping over things, but then looking around, staring, going, hey, where did everyone go? Yeah, that's not as helpful. So there is never enough about field awareness. And you can just do that going down the street and practicing looking at your periphery and seeing what you notice. Sounds boring, but extremely helpful for the person like me who is not particularly talented in paying attention.
I love and appreciate you, because that's something I've actually been harping on in the mid-realm command chats and in a lot of our training. Is field awareness is so important. And one of the things we tell people to do is go watch your favorite sport, or go play a video game that requires team speak, or whatever you want to call it, like Overwatch or a first-person shooter or whatever. Just even if it's not your bag, it can really teach you to pay attention to what your team is doing and whatnot. I love the take a walk idea. If you don't mind me borrowing that, I might add that to my next write-up.
Not at all. Awesome. I walk my dogs all the time, so I might do something while I'm walking them. So it's so that's for like kind of the newer person. One of the other things is I like to fight sword and dagger a lot, but sword and dagger isn't necessarily the best use in melee. So people will pick up all kinds of stuff. I don't know why they pick up a cloak. Some people do, if that's what they want to do. Case, buckler, stick, and you can pick up whatever you want, but if you don't train it, then it's not really effective. So even at home, if you're like, hey, in melee, I really want to do case, well, then you better get your offhand being able to hold a sword for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, because at least you can do that, and tip control. Or if it's a buckler, whatever it is, but there's no reason why you can't be picking up what you want to fight in melee much more often and making sure that you're much more comfortable with it, especially if it's not what you typically fight in tourney, which it doesn't necessarily have to be. And then just to keep it short, lastly, for those people who have a mind for it, chess is an excellent way. I play on, I think it's mychess.com or something like that, where you can play against a computer. But also reading books. There's a lot to say from, you know, The Art of War and some of the other stuff, and Machiavelli. And if that's your dork, then absolutely do it, because there are some really relevant things when it talks about armies. And it doesn't matter what weapon you're using. It can play a part, but a lot of those basic concepts. So if that's more of your mind, then by all means.
Absolutely. And I think those are some very, very good points to bring up about training your mind and your body to be ready for whatever melee throws your way. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Natalya. I'm going to jump to Gavin now, which is a totally different order than anything I've done so far. How can an individual train for melee?
So I first dumped an old class handout in the chat. But I think, especially now when you can't go get other people, one of the first things I would really emphasize is fitness and heat adjustment and bulletproofing your knees. So a lot of the injuries that happen in melees are heat injuries or tripping, falling, hurting your leg, your ankle, knees. And so, I mean, I'm not the fittest dude ever, but when I really decided I wanted to be good at both fencing and melee, I started working on, first started by just training to run a 5K. So I did the Couch to 5K program, right? And I was in North Carolina, so it was really, really hot, and Pennsic was nice and cool, relatively speaking. The second thing when I started to really take it to the next level is I changed to like a Tabata sprint type exercise workout. That is far more similar to what exertion in a melee is like. Once you have the base of being able to run a 5K, right? It's sprint, 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 stop, sprint, 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 stop. And that really echoes what your actual demands are in melee. And then the third side of this is really that you want to get used to moving, and both of those will help over different terrains. So don't just do it on pavement, but also really working on exercises that are going to protect your knees and ankles. So there's something called ice skaters, which is sideways jumping. There's something called grapevines. That sort of agility exercise really can help get used to stabilizing your legs as you're moving. So that's sort of at the bottom to middle, or if you're not doing those things, is what I would really recommend. At the high end, now what I would say is go read, or there's really cool YouTube videos that explain all of the things and tactics and strategies of historic battles. So go read about Caesar's, or watch videos on Caesar's campaigns in Gaul and Iberia, Hannibal in the Punic Wars, Rommel in North Africa, Napoleon's tactics and strategies are also very interesting on that front. And you can find there's I think it's like I'd have to look at what the YouTube channels I really like are, but there's a whole bunch of those. Historia Civilis, I think, is one of them. That's really all the Roman stuff. But that can really help think about reducing battles to what really needs to be done and figuring out how to sort of make those things happen.
That is excellent perspective, and I have to agree completely that conditioning can make a world of difference once you get to Penzic. We have so many people who never do anything outside other than walk to their car, and they end up getting heat stroke within 15 minutes because our armor is a convection oven. All right, last but not least, Mateo, what can you say about training as an individual for melee?
These guys covered a lot of stuff that I would say, especially like cardio. Like I'm a Zombieland guy, so like cardio, double tap. Those are the two things that I think you need to really do well on the melee field. And cardio in particular, like I'm hearing something.
I pulled up the my favorite YouTube channel that talks about that is a great place to go to learn about melee tactics throughout history. Yeah. And it decided it wanted to just start playing at me. So
bad moderator. Bad mod.
So anyway, cardio, like right there with you, right? Like, and I in particular appreciate what Gavin said about stability on joints. I hadn't thought about that until now. I typically wear like rigid knees whenever I fight in a melee. And that's just something that I recommend to other people. But these are the things that I teach people to practice. So the first thing I teach people to practice on their own is to deepen their lunge and to smooth their lunge out. So make it fast and deep, and make sure that it's leading with the hand so that it's as hard to recognize that it's coming as possible. So that's one of the things that I do is like work on lunge, work on deepening your lunge, work on that, trying to get parallel, get your foreleg deep enough to where your foreleg is actually parallel to the floor, or as close to that as you can, if that makes sense, that your leg is creating a right angle. To work on the ability to recover after a lunge quickly, so to be able to lunge and then recover quickly so that you're not getting caught hanging out in the breeze. I ask people to work specifically about conditioning their shoulders to hold a weapon at extension or a buckler at extension for long periods of time. One of the things that I love to see when I'm looking at the other guy on a melee line is their buckler sort of like creeping into their body and sort of like resting on their chest. That's my favorite, because that is dead. That's just a dead man. That's just a dead person walking, because down and up and they're done. So that's a thing. So conditioning the muscles in addition to conditioning your cardio, I think, is important. So if and that's for everybody, whatever their ability or whatever the extent of what they can do, anything is better than nothing. And so like if I can get my army to like all agree to like do a little cardio every day, or all agree to do some push-ups every day or something, right, to build their bodies up. So just kind of like stacking on what Gavin said. I would encourage people to teach themselves to juggle. So this is a weird thing, But when you teach yourself to juggle, you fail a lot, right? And that's an important life lesson to learn, is to persevere through failure. But also what you're teaching yourself is hand-eye coordination that exists outside of your direct scope of vision, right? So if I can juggle 3-4 balls like this, da, 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 and one of them goes a little astray, the more I practice juggling, the more I can reach out and pick that up, right? Without really seeing it, I can calculate the trajectory of the arc of the ball, okay? And that helps me when I'm in a melee line, picking up the trajectory of the thrust that just barely triggers my reflexes from out of my direct line of vision. So juggling has long helped me to throw parries I didn't deserve to throw and to save lives to my right and left that I had no business saving. Because to me, it's just juggling balls coming at me, right? And so that's one of the things I insist. It's one of the things I torture my cadets with is here's 3 juggling balls. You get to learn how to juggle now. Teach yourself. I'm not going to show you much, right? I'll show you like the first thing, but you need to teach yourself because it's hard to teach yourself and it's frustrating to teach yourself. But if you succeed in doing it, it's a good thing, right? It's learning through trial and error and learning to do that. So that's one of the things that's kind of out of left field that I like to do for people. So yeah, lunges, working your lunge, deepening your lunge, working muscle conditioning. Choose a style. I am a buckler fighter when I fight melee, for example, or I'm a case fighter when I fight melee. Choose a thing and learn that thing in that context. Think about what that context is and how it changes like your case fight from tournament to melee, and think about how like your buckler game has to change when you're not just protecting your own body, but the person to the side of the buckler that it's on. So that's some things that I would encourage people to do outside of what everybody else said, which was all brilliant.
Okay, I am so glad you were not my Don, because I was named the complete unteachable person when I tried to take a juggling class. Like, they kicked me out the second day and gave me my money back.
We give it to you. I get you going. No worries. No
So
worries.
I'm so glad you're not mine. And so we wouldn't be going over time if it hadn't been for our little technical difficulty. So please bear with us.
It'll be an hour. It'll be 2 hours in the recording.
It'll be about an hour, and we're going to go over probably about half an hour here. But the next thing I'm going to ask the panelists is, we've talked about the individual. We've talked about some things you can do to warm up before melees, like to get your body ready for melee. It's not really a warm up. I know that there was a question in chat about how to warm up for melees, which we will get to after this next question. But the next question I have for you, and I'm going to ask the panelists one at a time to pick their favorite drill, except for you, Natalya. You implicated yourself with wacky games. So you're going to have to talk to us about wacky games. And then you can give us a favorite drill if you want. But I want each panelist to give us their favorite drill, kind of in depth. How do you play it? How do you implement it at a practice? And how many people do you need to do it? I'm going to start with Gavin, since Mateo just spoke, and we're going to end with Natalya. So, Gavin, you're first.
All right. So the drill that I really have liked is essentially you set up a line fight. So maybe 5v5 up to like 10v10 or so. All right. And you have them go. And as soon as someone dies, that other side has 5 seconds to kill every member of the other team, or they lose.
Okay, what do you call it?
I don't have a name for it.
You don't have a name? Just kill all the guys in 5 seconds?
Gavin's awesome drill.
We're going to name it, yeah, Gavin's awesome drill. Thank you for christening it, Mateo. But, okay, so what does that teach?
So really it's focused on, I mean, you can do all the different line fight stuff, like don't get yourself stabbed for stupid reasons. But for the team that ends up hitting someone first, it really teaches exploiting that opportunity and following through rapidly and fully. For the team that loses someone and starts getting beaten, it teaches that fallback, reform, and counter that, and it kind of builds into a sort of a skirmish game because they just have to survive.
Okay. No, that's awesome. And that sounds like a lot of fun, and I can't wait to take it to my practice. And I'll call it Gavin's Awesome Melee. All right, Jervel, you're next. What's your favorite drill and why? How many people do you need to play it? How does it work? And what does it teach?
My favorite one is called the Four Corners. You essentially will take hurdles and set them up in like a big plus shape design. So you have 4 intersections all right next to each other. And you need ideally 8, or at least 8, ideally 12 people to do this. And so your little unit walks up into one of the doorways that are made by the hurdles. And your objective is to kill everybody who's not on your team. I like this one a lot because it forces a lot of peripheral awareness, plus a good balance of aggression with timing. Because if you try to cross right into no man's land, you're going to get hit from your sides. And if you jump too far out to around the corner, again, you're going to get hit from the side. So it's a lot of awareness of the people around you and your partners.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just sit there and are too scared to do anything, well, you just stay in the back and nothing happens and you're bored the entire time. And when you die, you just go to another door that looks a little undermanned. And you just keep doing this for 10 or 15 minutes.
So for clarity, is that kind of, if I can get my background set up kind of like this?
Yes,
And
exactly.
we're in like this space.
You need to raise it just
We
a little
can't
bit.
see that space. Yeah.
Like people are inside this plus sign, not out here.
Correct. And if you the pluses are designed to be 2 to 3 men wide, depending on the people you have.
Very cool.
Cool.
You're next.
Yeah, most of my drills we've talked about before, like Fox and the Hounds, but one of the ones that the guy who taught me how to defense taught me, Jock, God rest him, he did this tournament and he called it the Corsican Brothers Tournament, if you've ever seen the movie. So the Corsican Brothers, they're twin brothers, and one person's wounded, the other person feels it. It's very like classic mythology, classic story, right? Well, you can run a tournament like that. You can run a drill like that. So if your opponent is wounded, they're required to call out loud where they're wounded, and you, or if your partner is wounded, they're required to call out loud where they're wounded, and you are required to enact it. So if they get killed, you're dead. If they lose an arm, you lose your arm, right? And what that does, it gets a little complicated, right? But what that does is it forces you to always be aware of the person you're fighting with and to take responsibility for their well-being in the fight. And so I think it's a fun way to force people to pay attention, to communicate verbally, and then also to protect themselves because they're protecting the person that they're fighting with. So it takes the impetus of my life and puts it on somebody else, which I think is useful for melee fighters to be able to do.
Okay, very cool. All right, Natalia, talk to us about wacky games, please.
I mean, games are just different things we do. So we'll do 2-on-1, but that one is usually someone who's a more skilled fighter. And then the other 2 will either trade out. So if one of them dies, then the next person goes in, and now it's 2 new people having to work together and kind of come up with a plan on the fly. But especially with a bunch of newer fighters, as the more experienced, you get to run around a whole, which gets you tired and fighting more, but it also allows the newer people to learn how to work 2 versus 1 and to specifically develop the skill of basically preoccupying someone who would otherwise destroy a line. And especially if it goes down to 1-on-1, and then learning how to preoccupy. So one of the variations is you have 2 people, and if one of them dies, they get, I think it's a full minute before the next person can join them.
Oof.
So if the person who's left by themselves just dies, then 2 new people come out. If he survives at least for the minute, that someone else can join him to help him again overcome the other person. And of course, if he does beat him, then he gets to be the one that's the one person fighting on 2. So it also teaches them to kind of stay safe while preoccupying someone without taking too many people away from the line, which sucks when you're the person being preoccupied, but is great when you can have an MOD over there and not waste 3 people on them and they're not destroying your line. So there's stuff like that. We've done zombie So one team, usually the smaller team gets to revive versus a larger team. Usually the smaller team's in like a town battle setup or like a bridge battle setup where the other team's out there. So the ones with not as many people, although they get to revive all the time or be zombies, it's exhausting for them, but they also have to hold that piece of land, and kind of teaches specifically more like the bridge battle or the town battle, I know from Gulf Wars. So we'll do things like that. We already talked about our game We Win, where everyone starts separately and then it kind of turns into chaos a little bit. Trying to think of, we do ones where you have a very short time to win your battle. And if you don't, so I think it starts with one-on-one. And if you don't beat your opponent, then someone else joins them. And it's only one-sided. So now it's 1-on-2. And you have 30 seconds to a minute to beat those two people. And if you don't, or nothing changes, then a third person is added on, basically until it resolves. So it teaches people to be much more, again, I'll use the word aggressive, but in that, like, I'm going to end this fight now because I need to get back to what I'm doing. So it teaches them to really get through what they need to do and do a job.
Close the deal.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Around and kill again.
About to get a whole lot worse.
We do that same drill. We call it Circle of Death because everyone around the circle is live, and if you back up too much into them, well, now you're DFB'd.
That's awesome.
We also give the individual fighter a certain number of lives, so they're a little less timid about losing. So.
Nice.
That's awesome. I miss the Outlands. I love hearing, like, we do this, and it's something like, if I tried to introduce that as a melee drill here, people would be like,
a word of strange.
Wait a minute,
but
that's
all
not
the
in the
good.
Right, we don't have the
Wait.
paperwork on that.
There's a book? Okay.
There's always a book in the Middle Kingdom.
No, there's a binder. There's a binder, and there's
a clipboard and a whiteboard.
By the
I
previous.
figured you can add pages to a binder, and you can't add pages to a book.
You can't always put shit in.
I really can't make fun of it because I've been the keeper of the binder for a little while now.
It just is what it is.
It is what it is.
We pull papers out just to make it smaller.
Hey, wait. Oh, yeah.
Get it out.
Oh, yeah.
That's the book.
Okay, so we like to conclude these. First, we have a question in the audience, which is, what's your favorite way to warm up before a melee? Keep in mind, like, it's a 5-on-5 or like a war melee at Penzik. So I'm gonna do this as the speed round.
Mentally
Gavin?
or physically or both?
Both, mentally or physically. We're gonna do this as a speed round. So if you can keep this to a paragraph or less, you win. We're gonna start with Gavin. How do you warm up for melee?
Pickups.
Perfect. He might win. One word. Mateo, how do you warm up for melee?
Shot a Jack and a Jack and Coke. I'm kidding. Usually pickups combined with the march to the field. So singing and then like marching to the field, hanging out with people and connecting to people around me. That's how I warm up.
All right. When we get to your like bardic class, we need to find a way to integrate it to fighting the world. Maybe get the whiskey bards or whatever in here too. Natalia, how do you warm up for melee?
Pickups plus jumping around to get the adrenaline up. That helps with the mental stuff.
I've seen it.
Yep, same here. Jervel, how do you warm up for melee?
Well, I also like the jumping plan. There's a set of stretches I do pretty much before I pick up a sword and fight at all. So those are super important for melee in addition to the pickups.
All right, perfect. Great speed round, everyone. And I think Gavin still wins because it was one word. All right, so we end these every time with the same thing, which is the no shit there I was stories. But we try to tailor them to our panels. So this week, the no shit there I was story topic is the coolest thing you've ever seen a unit do. I don't want like a full dissertation. I want a good story. But if you can point out why what that unit was doing was a good thing in the bigger spectrum of melee and with regards to training as a unit.
How did
Bonus
they
point.
have trained for it?
Right.
Was
Bonus
it
point.
did they pull it off because of training?
Did they drill this? And I'm going to actually start with Natalya.
I guess it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Perfect.
And Mateo's gonna recognize this, and
I might get mad if you're telling my story. Go for it. What do you got?
oh, it might be.
We'll see.
It might be. I can pick a different one.
Go for it. You do your thing. You do your thing.
I
Yeah.
picked you first. The gods were not in his favor.
I have others. Don't worry.
I mean, I have other ones.
He's talked plenty. Tell your story.
So I was on the in North Shield and fighting, and I thought it was Gulf Wars as Mateo was, and I don't remember who it was, but he went behind the Ansteorra line, yeah, right, and starts calling out commands. I thought it was, but
It was Jack.
I wasn't sure. Yep. So he goes behind and right from the commanders and starts calling commands, and he's like, Ansteorra, one step back. And they listened.
They listened 3 times.
It took them
I'm
off.
not sure I was there for that. Yeah.
So really well-trained army, not
Oh my God.
themselves. But it was brilliant. And being on the opposite line, we're like, well, shit, we better keep going.
Oh my God. Well, and that's proof about battlefield awareness. Like good training and micromanaging is not always the best thing if they haven't figured out that this isn't what's supposed to be happening. That is great. That is absolutely great. All right.
Yes. That was not my story. That was brilliant. That was not my
Well,
story.
you're gonna get to go last because you're gonna be
Fair enough.
Yeah. Gavin, you're next.
So 7 years ago now, when I was still in Atlantia, I had a pretty solid 5-man team that was all the local practice group. I know, Bruce, you've met several of these people. Wistric knows who I'm talking about. And we had been involved in doing a lot of the training for Atlantia, sort of newer fighters at that point, like assessments, and we had built like a quick 5-minute spiel for new fighters to like, here's your first melee, here's what you're gonna go do, which is the first page of that document I sent out. But ultimately, there was a group, I think it was Bright Hills, which was all relatively newer fighters. This is a barony up in Maryland who had attended our class at like university or something, and then decided to go home and do it. And so we had one of the major tournaments. There was a 5-man-ish melee tournament of sorts. And so we ended up paired against them in one of these bouts. And they absolutely crushed us, doing exactly what we told them to.
All right. Well, we're gonna jump to Jervel next.
Well, my favorite story is just about how a unit split and just took this totally chaotic, was going to be a loss for our side, and without any real command, brought the unit back together, controlled the chaos, and brought us to victory. Our unit had gotten smashed by a bunch of hot sticks who butched through the middle of our line and got into the backfield, were causing a whole bunch of chaos. And our line naturally did kind of like a hammer and anvil. If people are used to that tactic, where one side that was taking a whole lot of aggression kind of turtled up and went super defense and just, before doing a slow and steady retreat. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, to see the rest of, I don't know where they came from or how they managed to do it, come through and counterflank the unit that was about to squish me. So it was really rewarding to see, talk about how your symbiosis with your unit, that they naturally are able to tell the stress that we were able and adapt their tactics without ever being told to do so to such effect.
Nice.
I'm not much of a bard, so I'm sorry.
What? Okay, no apologizing. We need to get you in on that aggression class.
Bardic aggression.
Maestra.
Bardic aggression is definitely a class.
Unapologetic domination of terrain.
See, I'm an unapologetic badass, but a
right.
storyteller, not so much.
And we love you for it, though. All right, Mateo, last but not least.
This one will have a little bit of length, so I apologize, but it's worthwhile. And I'm going to post a video at the
He's
end
a
that's going to
bard.
be worth your while.
That's why you were going last.
So my first year as general in North Shield, Siegfried von Kulmbach and Gwyneth were king and queen. So Siegfried was the first king of North Shield. Gwyneth was the first princess of North Shield. She's the one who, first of all, she's amazing and wonderful. And she's the one who, when first princess came up, they had a championship tourney. There was no prize. She took the sleeve off her own dress and gave it to the champion. And that sleeve has passed from hand to hand for 30 years, 25, 30 years. That's their big game, the Princess Sleeve. Anyway, so Gwyneth and Siegfried are king and queen. And one night at Warriors and Warlords, which is long before Gulf Wars, Gwyneth is drunk. And she is wandering about. Gwyneth is in her cups. And she's wandering about the site. And she's talking to somebody, and they're chatting as you do when you're in your cups. And at some point, she looks at the guy. And she's like, you know what I want when I'm queen? I want to blow up a cow. I want to blow up a cow. She did this when she was, had 3 sheets to the wind. So she didn't think anything of it. At her coronation, however, or halfway through that night, she looks at the guy and she's like, here's how it's going to go. It's going to go moo, boom, moo, boom. That's what I want. Okay, no problem. So at the coronation, which is the video I'll link in this thing, they decided to give Her Majesty what she wished. And so they built a papier-mâché cow, and they filled it with a particular inert gas, and they set it off the site so that they would not get in trouble with the board of directors. And then they ran a current through it and detonated a papier-mâché cow. Sorry. First, they filled a bunch of rubber gloves with this gas and shoved them into the cow, which they then ran the current through. And they blew up a cow. Moo, boom, right? That was the thing. North Shield has a command. North Shield Rapier's army has a command, and it's pulse. You've probably heard it before. Pulse now. Pulse chambers the round. Now is the firing of the round, right? And so Pulse now started in the mid-realm because we were in the mid-realm and transferred out to North Shield. So this year when I'm general happens to be the year that Ansteorra and Trimaris are allies. And that means that we're outnumbered something like 4-1, 3-1. It was like Penzik outnumbered numbers for the first time at Gulf War that I've ever experienced. And so we were not going to win. However, my job as general and North Shield's job that year happened to be to take the center flag and to hold it. And so my first wave of people that I was charging out with were actually mostly just grunts. There wasn't any hot sticks. They were coming up behind me. And our job was just to get 15 feet out in front of the flag and deal with whatever came at us, right? But we had changed our pulse command to moo, boom. Okay. And so moo was the chamber and boom was the round. So I'm charging out there behind this group of mostly new melee fighters, mostly unknown melee fighters. We get out in front, and what comes rolling towards us at the mosey is Ansteorra's flippin' white ocean murder squad, right? Now, like, I'm the only guy on the line who actually knows what I'm looking at. Like, I know the people that are in this line. I understand what's about to happen to us. And I'm like, form up, right? And they come in to engage, and I'm like, moo, boom, moo, boom, moo, boom. And they were dead to a man. We annihilated that unit to a man in 3 commands. It wasn't until their like second and third wave came up that we got pushed back beyond our flag, which then became the rest of that battle. But moo boom saved the day. So we're doing moo boom, right? And Sylvain, who's fighting for Trimaris over there, and Arnaz are both over there. And we're like, moo boom. And they're like, what the hell are they doing? And Sylvain's like, don't worry, it's just North Shield. But that was moo boom, and for Gwyneth, yes, that was my most exciting thing. And it was just grunts with no fear and doing the thing when they were commanded to do. It worked out really well.
That's terrifying. And if I hear that on the field, I would still be happier to hear that on the field than Pulse. Just for background, we've been trying to train that out because it sounds like hold.
You know, it doesn't. Pulse and hold are 2 different verbs, and I teach speech. So I know somebody always calls a hold, drives me nuts. Hold, pulse.
And you know, like Southerners and and
Wait,
Canadians, and they
wait,
they all use
wait.
different vowels.
By the way, the link that I just posted in chat is the link where you can watch that cow detonate if you're interested in
Are
watching
you
it for a while.
serious?
Yeah, that's
I-
serious.
Okay. I'm gonna
Time for those share screen.
pause so you guys can't hear it.
You can share the
I'm gonna
screen.
watch-
Oh, good lord! Let's see if we can do.
I don't think I can share my screen,
I
but
think I can share mine. Let's find out.
so we're gonna conclude this evening with the exploding of the cow. When did
and
the
Gwyneth, I hope you did
actual
get the permission
boom
of the bot,
happen?
otherwise I just got into trouble.
Wistric's
now.
gonna want to go to 23 seconds.
All right, let me pull this up. Let me share.
Great memories, Mateo. That was one hell.
Okay.
Were you there? Were you in that line?
Yeah.
Yes, that was a great moment.
Okay. Let's see. Optimize for full screen video. Full screen video clip. Here we go. And hopefully, I had audio issues with this in an earlier session tonight, but hopefully this won't be too awful. Let's find out. 23 seconds?
About 23 seconds. 20 to 23.
It'll be a bit. Yeah, there you go.
How's the audio? How's the video? Oh, no, I just. No, I'm just keep rewinding it. Oh, wait, there we go. Let's see.
So,
Exploded again?
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Nice.
So,
So, that's what I was hoping for.
hilarious side note, I'm fencing at that event, and this nobody knows what's happening. Nobody knows except the people who are involved, right? All I see is this pickup truck driving across the field, and like a few of these like inflated rubber gloves just float out and hit the ground, and like the truck squeals to a stop, and these guys like jump out of the truck and go and collect very carefully all these gloves full of gas and carefully put them back in the truck. I'm like, what the is this? What the hell is all going on? And then of course I found out that cow was stuffed with them, and yeah. So
Boom.
That is damn impressive, A. And B, what a way to end episode 4. I got nothing. Like, I have nothing to say.
I have one thing to say, but let me see if I can.
Uh-oh. Oh, no.
uh-oh.
Oh, no. Wistric's up to something.
I can't hear him though.
I can't hear him either.
I had to mute myself because YouTube decided it wanted to keep playing. Okay, I do have one thing to say. One thing, slightly important. Saturday, August 8th, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Fighting the World goes to Pinzik Virtual War by talking about the D&D town battle that we're not supposed to talk about. The most epic, the most hated, the most wonderful and glorious
Map.
melee at ever. And we're going to get the people who were there together, and we're going to get drunk, and we're going to talk about it and all of the ways that it could have turned out so well and all of the ways that it didn't.
Yep. It's going to be a really fun panel. We've got Brigid from the mid / the east / on tier.
Everywhere.
We have lined up Anton from the mid. We're hoping to line up some people from the east, and we're hoping for Roz from Atlantia. So it should be a hoot pulling apart the vision, what actually happened, and what probably could happen if they had time to tweak it nowadays. So it's not our normal time, but look for the link, and hopefully we
Saturday,
won't run into
August
any
8th, 9 p.m. Eastern
Yep.
Time.
Sounds fun.
All right. Thank you guys, everyone, for tuning in. I'd like to spend 2 seconds thanking our panelists. You guys were awesome tonight. This was probably our most practical Fighting the World we've had, and we really appreciate you
We'll try not
guys
to do it again.
taking the time to give us your favorite drills, what's important for training melee and small units, and what's important for unit cohesion. So
Everybody in the chat, any of our panelists, go to the Facebook page. I posted the post about what are your favorite drills? What are your favorite melee games? What are your favorite, whatever you want to call it, that gets people training melee? Please go to the Facebook page, add it on there. Drop your drills there, drop your games there. Let us know what you do.
Yeah.
With that, good night.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
stop the recording.
Bye.
Thank
Stop
you
the
guys.
recording.
Thank you, everyone.